Welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker over here on Capitol Hill in the Cannon Building Rotunda to just get a spark of what's been happening here in your nation's capital. A lot of disappointment. A couple of bills went down south. A lot of disappointment. One bill didn't even make it over here to the House side. The Senate bill that you've heard so much about that has border in it. Doesn't only have border in it. Has Israel in it, has Ukraine in it, has the Asian Pacific in it. And it's just looking like we're at a standstill. We're going to talk today on Cure America about how it's not really a standstill. There's a lot of noise that goes into getting legislation out of Washington. But sometimes when you hear about it in soundbite news, it just seems like they're doing nothing. Well, actually, they're doing something. We have 435 House members, 100 senators that are trying to move the country forward, but they're tremendously divided on how that should happen. So here on the House side, of course, we saw the Israel bill. Let's just get them some funding. They're really needing to pull out all that we now know about Hamas. I mean, the long tunnels and the deaths and the hostages and how many of them are now in eternity. So there's much that has to happen, but how? And that's where they keep getting stuck. Speaker Mike Johnson seems to be doing the best he can. And one of the reasons I came over here is I'm going to try to run into him. But even if not, we are going to sort through the noise of the news today on Cure America to find you some truth about what's going on in your nation's capital. Congressman, thank you so much for spending time with me. The great state of Pennsylvania is unique in why they sent you here. And one of the things that I think is getting lost in the discussions, as you guys are having heated discussions, is how the differences between the different areas. I mean, we are a representative government. And so give me your opinion on how it is that we're now looking at having to legislate as one full country instead of having the uniqueness of our different districts represented in those decisions you guys are making.
Well, you do both, right? You do represent your district, but you also focus on the greater good of what's best for the country. I tend to say what's best for Pennsylvania is best for the United States of America, and I believe that. And that goes for my district as well. I'm for national security, I'm for border security, I'm for energy independence, if not domestic energy dominance. I'm for United States' business being the most competitive in the world. I'm for fiscal sanity to rein in wasteful spending. So all those, all those things are beneficial to all Americans.
They are, but now we're stalled. I mean, the Senate bill is pretty stalled, not coming over to the House. And you mentioned, that you want that independence and you like that national security. What is your opinion on what happened there? Should you guys have a discussion about it?
To be honest with you, sometimes I feel that our friends and colleagues and the Democrat caucus, their idea of negotiating is to get everything they want and give us nothing. And that might be a little bit harsh, but in this case, the provisions that would have allowed us to vote for it, me to vote for the border bill, would have been remain in Mexico, would have been some deterrence, would have been actually enforcing the asylum laws as they exist, which Secretary Mayorkas does not do. Instead, the majority of the bill is about funding for processing and resettling, and added funding for the NGOs. It's not what the American people want.
Well, especially after we just heard what some of the NGOs, so-called, were doing in Gaza and participating in what happened.
We want deterrence. We need this to slow. We shouldn't be providing incentives for illegals to come into our country. We should be providing deterrence. Look, I always tend to say, high fences but wide gates. We need to be a welcoming country, but we need to know it needs to be controlled as our laws state. And again, Secretary Mayorkas has not brought control to our border.
Now, where were you on that vote?
I was entirely for impeaching him, only because I don't believe he's enforcing the laws. He says he is. This has been going on for 3 years. It's not like he's just had a bad practice.
And it's not like we didn't know what to do, because Biden did undo a lot of things that were keeping us safer.
Precisely.
We understand that. So one final question I want to ask you about that wide gate, that allows in. Some people are saying that the 5,000 number is being misinterpreted. Some of my friends at the center are saying it's being misinterpreted because we're allowing people in anyway. 50,000 are going to come in anyway. It's just a way to say, kind of like if you were in the DMV and there's 20 people in line, but only one more hour, they close the doors then, but they don't kick the ones that are in the line out, what would you say?
Well, who's going to like that? The cartels. The cartel's going to say, hey, who wants to be first in line? Give me another $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whatever it is that would be an incentive to them. And as well, why is the number in there? Okay, so then he meaning the president, after that can enact the emergency powers. Why is the number there if that's not what the target is going to be? Why wouldn't it then be 2,500 before emergency powers kick in? So it's really, I think this thing is a political gambit. It really doesn't have much teeth to it. It won't actually slow illegals entering our country, and in many ways, I think it makes it worse because of the incentives for, and I'm for the work visas, but the border's got to be controlled first. Okay. And then the money for the processing. I mean, all that does is it alleviates the pressure at the border, but it sends more people all over the rest of the country.
I think a lot of Americans would agree with you that it's become so complicated, and it does seem simple. Just don't let people come in this way. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate
Glad
you.
to do it. Thank you.
So for all of you that don't think anything good happens here in Washington, D.C., and there are no good people here, you just met someone, hardworking, just trying to sort through the details to try to make the country better, as you just heard. So next we're going to go over, I'm going to finish my conversation that was started last week with the rabbi and the pastor who are here to protect the interests of Israel, to talk to their legislators about why Israel is important and why they are thankful for those that are supporting Israel in its war on Hamas. This is the Israel Advocacy Day. They are probably very tired. Started early this morning, went on Capitol Hill, and I've grabbed a pastor and rabbi.
I came here because I think that the Judeo-Christian values that allow us to have clarity when it comes to Israel and its struggle with Hamas is shared, and it's a moral calling to come and speak up on behalf of God and the truth.
Everything the rabbi said, that today was about bringing us together for the moral cause for Israel, for their rights to exist and their right to defend themselves, to live free from harm. And
Now, did y'all know each other before?
No.
We did not.
No.
And now I understand you spent some time together here on Capitol Hill?
Absolutely.
Who'd you go
Not
see?
enough.
Oh, not
enough.
yet.
No, more.
New York and Baltimore?
Big time.
Tell me then, where'd you go? What did you do? Because this morning we heard from some incredible speakers.
So we
And
met
then you
with
went out
Congressman
to meet.
Lawler
Okay.
himself, the man
Okay.
himself. We met
Well,
with
from what state? Tell me.
Lawler is from upstate New York, 17th district.
Right, New York.
Is he your...
He is mine, and
Okay.
it's an honor.
Okay,
And
really?
then
Have
we-
you met him
man.
before?
I didn't, but our community was really behind him, and we let him know that you stand up for what's right. We're going to stand next to you.
Okay, his name again was Lawler?
Lawler.
Okay, and so tell me what you were saying.
And so then we met with.
Were they surprised to see a
No.
pastor and Jewish rabbi together?
I don't think so.
Not really, but they
I
weren't.
think they're pleased.
No, they were very
They were pleased.
pleased.
Okay.
They were grateful. We were grateful. There was a lot of gratefulness going on.
Okay.
And then we met with Senator Sullivan, Dan Sullivan's staff.
Oh, he's great.
And he's great.
Yes,
and
we
then
know well.
the cherry on the top for us is Rubio, Senator
Ah, you went
Rubio,
to Marco Rubio's.
where we really pressed in at the end
Okay.
for action points. What can we do
Right.
to put pressure to get the funding through, to get support through, to deal with Iran and deal with Hezbollah and the funding and everything, and we want action plans. So I got to go back to my people and say, well, how do we push Rubio's SHIP Act through? How do we get Kennedy's thing through that's going to loose the funding right now?
Because I'm sure that he had a lot to tell you on that issue. He's a very smart man, and he is very engaged in these things. Thanks, gentlemen, for speaking with us here on BlackCommunityNews.com, Cure America. Well, here's my very special guest, Carolyn Glick, and some of you may already know her. I've already told you about her bio, and I just want to thank you in person for being here, for an incredible presentation you just made, over an hour of giving us insight that no one else is promoting here in our country in the news when it comes to on the ground, what's happening in Israel. And you mentioned that Israel in this war is a war not against Hamas as much as it's a war for survival. Elaborate on that for me, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your program, Star. It's really a privilege. So, what we discovered on October 7th, it's that it wasn't just Hamas that invaded Israel. It was the Palestinian people in Gaza who invaded Israel, because you did have about 2,000 terrorists from Hamas who came in with their heavily armed, but they were followed immediately by thousands of regular Palestinians from Gaza who participated in the atrocities. They murdered, they raped, they decapitated, they looted, they kidnapped Israelis, and then they brought back to Gaza hostages that they then sold to Hamas. There have been, I think, 2 Israeli former hostages who were released in the original hostage swap for terrorists in November, where we saw 110 Israeli hostages freed from Hamas, and they reported being sold by Palestinian civilians who entered into Israel after Hamas and were full participants in the slaughter. And so that's one aspect of it. And also Palestinian Authority terrorists from their aligned terrorist organizations also participated in the atrocities and beheading and the sadism and burning alive. So it was an operation that was carried out by the Palestinian people against Israel. Hamas is not separate from the Palestinians. They enjoy the support of 3/4 of the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. And so this is an organic outcropping and leadership of the Palestinian people. And so what we saw was that the Palestinian people as a society are organized around their desire to annihilate the Jews. And again, 85% of the bodies that were recovered from the Negev, from the overrun communities, showed signs of torture. And, you didn't have one bullet wound to the head. It wasn't that people were just shot dead. All of the bodies were found with multiple wounds, so that it was a sadistic, there was an orgy of murder and the sadism. So what that showed really was that this isn't a war for peace. This isn't an enemy that you can either appease or defeat and then live at peace with. And so long as they're continuing to be organized around the principle of genocide, coexistence is impossible. You have to have a fundamental shift in the sentiments and in the values of Palestinian society, because right now they don't want to coexist. They don't want to reach a point where they have been appeased, where they're satisfied. They just want us all dead. That's how they define themselves as a people. 94% of Palestinians said they'd never been more proud to be Palestinians as they felt after October 7th.
You mentioned that, and it's just disgusting. And I see you fighting tears as well as I right now. And I told our audience here at Cure America last week that the embassy, Israeli embassy, showed the footages, and I couldn't even speak. We had to cut to break. It's just that visual, that the satanic behind it. You with Jewish heritage, you live there in Israel right now. Explain to us what you just said in the private briefing about how this is a continuum, how this is not about finding a place for the Palestinians, that this is a continuance of we hate Jews and we want to annihilate them.
Look, we had our War of Independence in 1948-49. We were invaded by 5 Arab armies that had the explicit goal of wiping Israel off the map and throwing all the Jews into the sea. And, people thought, okay, well, Israel survived that invasion and we were able to push them back, and therefore Israel's survival was guaranteed. But we've seen that over the intervening 75 years since 1949, that with all of the wars that happened, they were all with the declared purpose of throwing Israel into the sea for killing the Jews. We did, but what we saw on October 7th was that all of the declarations that the Palestinians have made, that the Iranians have made, that the Lebanese have made over the years, that they want to kill all the Jews, that the Jews are subhuman, that all of these things, that they actually mean it.
Believe it. Well, where I think a lot of Americans have a trouble is that it's clear to Jews, and especially today after October 7th, it's clear to the Biden administration, but what's not clear is why we're starting to see signals from the Biden administration that some of the activities going on now are Israel's fault. You said so many things, and I just wish I could keep you for an hour, 3 hours, and you told me you're going back to Israel this weekend, so I won't be able to get you again anytime soon. So I just need you to explain what it is that we're missing in our headline news, that the Biden administration is sending signals that they're on the side of Israel, but it seems that they're doing something else. Number one question. Number two, is this a shock to the Israelis? Because, as you said, you kind of knew, but then you saw it all culminate on October the 7th, and then you were telling us about how people in Israel are actually not desiring this whole two-state solution that we keep hearing needs to occur to get peace there.
You know, we've sort of been subjected to a political warfare campaign for the past 50 years by the Palestinians, by the Arabs, by their allies in American society and throughout the West and the European Union in particular, where they've tried to pretend that the David and the Goliath in the story of Israel has been turned on its head. And rather than Israel being the lone Jewish state inside of the Arab world, where you have 25 Arab states and 52 Muslim states all surrounding Israel, that it's really Israel is the Goliath and the David are the Palestinians. But and so people started to believe that there was something inherently wrong with Israel because Israel is Goliath. And so they've changed the whole narrative. They've turned it on its head, and they projected the Arab world writ large, or the Islamic world writ large's desire to annihilate the Jews, and they projected it onto the intended victims, or the actual victims, the Jews, and said that the actual victim is the people who are trying to annihilate the Jews. So we've all been subjected to this kind of conditioned response to think that there's something inherently immoral around the Jewish state. And so after October 7th happened, and it was a cold shower of reality, or cascade of reality for Jews in Israel and for Jews in America and in other places, where they said, wait a minute, that was a lie, that we really are David. You still have this chorus of multitudes saying, no, you can't be David. You have to be Goliath. You must be Goliath. Let's attribute all of the evil that's being undertaken against you to you, which is why we see now Israel and the International Court of Justice, South Africa, is accusing us of genocide, when what we saw on October 7th was a manifestation of the genocidal goals of the Palestinians and their supporters.
And horrifically so.
Yes.
I mean, some of the pictures, it's just like, this is not even human to destroy someone like this, and including young children. So this narrative, though, went on for a long time. It seems that, did the Jewish people just accept that role, or did they actually think that maybe working with the UN and America that they could work through that realigning of who they really are in the region? What happened that Israel was caught off guard, and the Jewish people, including America, were caught off guard to how deeply rooted this hatred is?
So you mentioned that I have Jewish heritage. I'm a proud Jew. I'm a religious Jew, raising our family as such in Judea. We live in Ephrat, which is the place that King David is from. That's where he was born and grew up, in Judea. And so we're very well aware of who we are, and my children are raised in that way to understand what it means to be a Jew, religiously and socially, etc. And a lot of Jews weren't raised that way. They didn't have that privilege, and they were raised as Westerners and seeing themselves as just people who are good people and people of goodwill. And they bought into the idea that there's something wrong with Israel. That's what they were taught. That's what they were taught all along for the past 50 years. So they become very confused, and now they're waking up to the reality of the morality of the cause of the Jews, and they're trying to sort of square this circle. So I think that that's one of the problems that we're facing. But, like you saw in the footage of what happened to us on October 7th, you can't unsee those things. And you can't, and the people who then at Harvard and all of the cities in the United States that are marching for Hamas and against Israel, they're really marching for more of that. They're marching for genocide.
And they know it. They've seen the footage too. And as you mentioned, they celebrated, and they're celebrating in this country. what's the next step? You came all the way here to brief us, to work Capitol Hill, to help us doing on the day after the Israel bill went caught fire, that it's not going to happen, for more aid. You mentioned how we got in the situation that Israel is dependent on that aid, and I want you to elaborate on that, because you said that the Obama administration kind of set the stage for Israel to now need us for even just general ammunition. But thank you for coming. And what would you want to accomplish? What should we be thinking about? This audience are evangelicals. They love the Lord and are looking for your direction, because our hearts are with you.
Thank you so much, and God bless you for your support. And look, Israel was self-reliant. We had very large military industries that we were capable of arming ourselves over the years, because nobody wanted to help us, really, in the early decades. The United States only started supplying Israel with arms in 1967, so after the Six-Day War. So, we were in a situation where, we were self-reliant. The idea of Zionism is that Jews have to be self-reliant and that we have to have national sovereignty in order to survive after 2,000 years of exile. That's the whole message of Zionism, is that we have to be responsible for ourselves. But what happened was that under the Obama administration, they signed a military assistance deal with Israel that required Israel, that gave Israel sort of $3.8 billion worth of military equipment from the United States platforms, particularly Air Force, air jets and things that are all made in America. But all of the money had to be used in the United States. So it induced Israel to close a lot of our local military production lines for tank shells, for ordnance, for our Air Force.
So we gave you the money to build these things, but they had to be made and built here.
They're all built here, so it's sort of a subsidy for American military industries that then they ship it to Israel, which meant that it wasn't economical for Israel to keep our domestic production lines, because we trusted the United States. And so now, after the United States emptied all of our emergency stores in January of 2023 and transferred it all to Ukraine for the use of the Ukrainian military, Israel started reopening a lot of the production lines that we had closed, thinking that we could rely on American supply. And
this was last year.
This was in January 2023. They emptied it out and sent it to Ukraine.
And so you just kind of automatically started reopening because
we saw that there was a shortage of a lot of the 155 millimeter rounds and other things because of the war in Ukraine, but we weren't producing enough. We hadn't anticipated this massive war breaking out. So we do have domestic production lines, but they're only now again, but they're not manufacturing fast enough in order to supply for our needs. So we still need the military resupply from the United States. The assessment is, and we're putting billions of dollars or shekels now into expanding massively our domestic production in order to restore our independence. But it's going to take time to ratchet it all up, and that's why right now we really do require American military assistance, and we need it now. And so the Biden administration is using that dependence to try to block us from winning.
That's astounding that you would even say that, because that's what it's beginning to sound like. In Obama's third term, they're finishing what he started to deplete Israel of its ability to be independent. Now, people may say that couldn't be. But it is, isn't it? This is the reality that you're explaining. This is reality. And I think it's fascinating. You just said something that I didn't know. So when they moved all of the things, January 2023, by October 2023, you're hit like this. Folks ought to know what you just told us. You mentioned in the briefing that it's going to take about 3 years for you to replenish this. But in those 3 years, you're at war. What can we do? What is it? Put more pressure on our legislators to say, guys, you need to fund this bill. Is it extra prayer needed that you guys will keep your resolve? You told us an example of how, because you didn't have the air equipment, or you were reserving the air equipment that you had, that you put actual boots on the ground and then were sabotaged and lost 21 of your soldiers. Give us some insight into how we can really help you.
Right. So the incident you're talking about happened two weeks ago in Gaza, that we put infantry and engineering corps soldiers to take down to destroy this building that was being used to attack Israel. And it was empty, there was nobody there, and it should have been bombed from the air. But because we're trying to conserve our air ordnance for our Air Force, they sent in engineering soldiers and infantry soldiers to protect them, to booby-trap the house to blow it up on the ground. And what happened was that Hamas saw them go in, Hamas terrorists, and just as they had finished laying the mines to blow up the house after they were going to leave, Hamas shot an RPG into the house, and it exploded on top of them, and they all were killed, 21 of them. And so that was the biggest single, most lethal event in the war for our soldiers, and it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have to conserve the air ammunition. When we're looking towards the northern front in Lebanon with Hezbollah, we have 80,000 internal refugees who can't go home to their homes in the border with Lebanon until we've moved Hezbollah away from the border sufficiently.
All we hear about is the displacement of the Gazians.
They're not being displaced.
Yeah, right. You said they're being trapped.
Right.
But yet, people don't appreciate that Israel's being impacted too, that they're moving away from your borders.
We have 200,000 refugees.
200,000 refugees in your own country right now.
Right. They're living in hotels.
They're living in hotels in Israel. You know, one of the things that gave me hope, Carolyn, that you mentioned in how we can stand with you is there is a resolve in the Israeli people. Unlike here in America, all Israelis go into the IDF
right.
To make sure that right after high school they go
right.
in, they make sure they're defending their country. Here, if you want to go, you go. If you get caught up in a war, we should bring it back. Our military has just totally depleted why it is even a armed services and or defense. But you guys take it very seriously, and one of the things that you gave me hope about is that the people there are adamantly going to win this war with the country, whether the leadership is not, whether the headlines say so or not, whether they're really trying to just get rid of your prime minister or not. You told me that the people, that you even have moms for their sons who are saying, send them in, let them finish their job, that you are not going to cease fire to be annihilated by people that keep chanting from the river to the sea. I think that that's one thing that I'd like for you to elaborate on as we close, for how important it is for us to know that our standing with you is because you guys are going to stand whether we stand with you or not.
Right, we are. We're going to stand no matter what. And we would like our friends to stand with us. But, 300,000 IDF soldiers, reservists, were called up on emergency orders on October 7th, and 330,000 of them showed up. So you had 130% call-up rate. People volunteered and demanded to be sent back to their units to serve in the war. And our reservists served for 3 months. And because of U.S. pressure to wind down our operations in Gaza largely, so they said under duress, okay, we're going to move to lower level intensity operations in Gaza. Part of it is possible because we did so much in the 3 months that our reservists were there fighting. So a lot of them have been demobilized. If I weren't in Washington today, this evening in Jerusalem, I would be speaking at a rally that was organized by the reservists who are standing outside of the government headquarters in Jerusalem to demand to be sent back into battle to win, that they didn't want to go home until the battle was completely won. And these are people, our son, for instance, is 29. He has 3 small children. He spent 3 months in Gaza. He was just let out yesterday from reserves. And he and his wife are going to be at the rally. And it's very difficult. We know. I mean, we were helping with the grandchildren the entire time. It's not just us. It's all the grandparents are on grandparent duty because of the sons that are serving. And you have Moms of IDF Soldiers was an organization that was founded by women. They were protesting outside of the U.S. Embassy last week because of the Biden administration's pressure on Israel to resupply Hamas through this humanitarian aid claim into Gaza, and that endangers our soldiers. So the Israeli people are united as one, as we haven't been in decades, that we must win this war. What we saw on October 7th convinced us all that this is a war for our survival. It's not about this territory or that territory. It's about our freedom, and it's about our survival as a people. And by the way, if God forbid something makes us not win in a convincing way that everybody understands that Israel came out of this victorious, just as America defeated the Nazis in World War II, then it's not just going to imperil us going forward, although it will imperil the entire free world and first and foremost the United States.
Yeah, oh my goodness, it can't be better said, and I wish I could keep you a lot longer. I know you have a lot of other meetings here. Thank you. Thank you, honey, and our heart is with you. Our hearts are with her, and I'm going to keep you updated because she's a friend of Advancing American Freedom. Up next, let's talk a little bit about the executive director here, Paul Teller, to see roles that we can play to make sure that Carolyn and her family and her interests in Israel have everything they need from us. I've mentioned we're here at Advancing American Freedom, and now I'm sitting with the Executive Director, Paul Teller, and Mike Pence is your boss.
Absolutely. Star, great to see you. This is fun. I love this.
We see each other all the time. You're sitting right across from Mike's office. You're running his gig. So before we get into why we see each other all the time,
Okay.
and then the most important reason I want to sit down with you, which is Israel, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, exactly. Well, thank you for being here, for giving us a chance to speak about what we do. So, Advancing American Freedom, it's the issue advocacy organization founded by Vice President Mike Pence, as you pointed out, after the White House, as basically a home base for us to still, as the name says, advance freedom in America, sure, but of course around the world as well. We feel that if you're advancing American freedom, you're advancing world freedom. And basically, it was just created to defend the policy legacy of the Trump-Pence administration, all the great successes of that. Push back as hard as we can against the left, who is trying to undo or is undoing practically all of those successes. But then more importantly, the day-to-day is just look to the future, look forward to how can we restore freedom in America, earn conservative wins again, build collaborations and new policies, new messaging to just unite the conservative movement as much as we can and go forward. So here we are.
Well, we want to unite the conservative movement, especially now, because it seemed to have fallen apart a lot after the Trump-Pence White House, and not particularly any of the two's fault. January 6th did occur. There came a difference in opinion there. But what we're seeing now, Paul, that many of us are concerned about is not just that personal difference of opinion. We're starting to see the conservative movement become much more of a populist movement, as if they bought in this idea that we're a democracy, not a republic. And as a result, the legislators are fighting like cats and dogs.
Yeah.
So I want you to speak into that, because one of the particular concerns of fighting like cats and dogs is people are getting hurt, like Israel. They need us to help them, and that bill totally fell apart.
Yeah.
Speak into that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're making fantastic points. In fact, you're seeing on the world stage the exact result of a kind of retraction of American leadership, right? When America is weak on the world stage, you get Palestinians emboldened to invade Israel, Russians emboldened to invade Ukraine, China threatening Taiwan. We can go around the world for a variety of things, and even Nigeria, right? Muslims slaughtering Christians. And who's really speaking up about that with any true, meaningful voice?
Mike Pence.
True. I mean, in the government.
Not exactly
right.
on our topic of today, but I'm glad you mentioned that. What is happening in Nigeria is unbelievable slaughter, and I think your organization is one of the only ones on the conservative movement that's pointing that out. So I may have to do an entire separate show because this is a democracy in that world, if you will, on that continent, 200 million people strong, and we're watching it become a failed state overnight.
No, that's right.
And little America.
And I certainly didn't mean to insult the non-government groups that are working on it. There's plenty.
No, I understand what you're saying.
But I just meant the governments
we're not.
are silent, right?
Very silent. And other African
terrible.
countries are noticing that silence, which then brings us to what's happening with Israel. Now we're way off subject to where most of the African countries now are shaking their head no at the UN because of the pressure of China.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Under the last administration, the Trump administration, that you worked in the White House on the Trump team for a while. You moved over to the Mike Pence team to continue to further our ideas of freedom. And that has unraveled under this Biden administration.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's so deliberate. This isn't just kind of an accidental, they stumbled into a roadblock. I mean, it is just...
Tell us, how? You got, because the bill that just, one of the bills, the Senate one that just collapsed,
so many.
was because of the, Ukraine and Israel and the Pan-Pacific and border in one bill. And then on the House side, we had an attempt to, impeach Mayorkas. That fell apart. We had an attempt to maybe we can single out and get Israel some money. That's on life support because it may happen next week. Speaker Mike Johnson saying it's
I think they're going to try again, right?
But all of these are interrelated because of a change in policy. Can you tell us what happened? That Trump had one policy, Biden has another policy. We all know elections matter, but my goodness, not like this.
Oh my God! Vice President Pence has a saying that he likes to repeat in many contexts: "Weakness arouses evil," right? And that's what the Biden, Harris, Blinken administration is doing on the world stage, just conveying and projecting weakness everywhere. And it starts at home. In other words, basically saying, hey, anyone who wants to come to America, don't worry about our laws. Don't worry about process. Don't worry about waiting in line. That's what I actually usually refer to illegal immigrants as. They're line cutters. They're cutting the line, right? There is a line. There's a legal line. Many people are in it. They're waiting. They're paying their fees. They're doing the things they need to do. These folks are just cutting. Imagine, that feeling when someone cuts on the line, whether it be at an airport, grocery store, you name it. That just feeling in your gut of like, oh, you're cutting the line, come on.
And then you find out later, oh, that's the wife. She just went to get ice cream for the kids. But still, lady, he wasn't supposed to be in line yet. He should have been with you getting the ice cream for the kids. And now you're getting in there. And now you guys have 30 things that you're bringing with you, including children, including pregnancy, and including where Cure is concerned on the border topics is that those 8 million now, as they have children waiting for their day in court 4 years from now, could have 4 children with protections of the 14th Amendment. So we've actually suggested and had that bill gone over to the House where we could really fight to get stuff in. We wanted them to round up all of the illegals and put them on our closed military bases as processing centers with a special category so that when their children are born, they're not automatically American citizens. But that's just the border component of it. It's basically
the domestic component of projecting this weakness.
Fast forward.
The international is the stuff we talked about before.
We're here because you invited an incredible speaker that we just sat down with, Caroline Glick. Many of
fantastic.
The audience may not be familiar with her work, and I'll tell you, we both started tearing up as she was talking, as I was listening. This is a turning point for our country as well. We're hearing what happened at Harvard. We're hearing what's happening in districts like Talib's where Cure has gone up. We've launched our own We Stand With Israel campaign that we're going into the squattish districts, if you will, or those that are making the case that they are on Hamas's side. There's just no moving them from that. They're even saying it out loud. Why did you have her here? What is your role and what? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part that she didn't answer as much as I would have liked is what specifically should we and can we do here in America with this audience to make sure that Israel has everything they need to win this war?
Yeah, great point. So for your audience, if you haven't heard of Caroline Glick, go Google her, look her up.
I just heard 20 minutes of her, but they do need to Google and look her up. In fact,
please get her writings, get her columns, subscribe to her emails, check out her web. Incredible. I would say the strongest pro-Israel voice, maybe anywhere on the planet. I mean, just incredibly clear, consistent, fact-based.
Our audience now knows that because I'm bringing them inside of Washington in a day, and so we were over at Capitol Hill, and then we were over in one of the buildings with the rabbis and pastors, and they've seen all of that in this episode, and now we're going to go into one of the private spaces where we do these types of meetings all of the time to hear from folks. But she was amazingly compelling.
Yeah, so compelling.
So tell us.
Well, I think she probably spoke. I unfortunately missed her interview, but she probably spoke about how important it is to try to rein in what the Biden administration is just saying, because they're. And she gave examples of this, I'm sure, but they'll say kind of very nice things about it. We stand with Israel and they're our greatest ally, whatever. The next sentence is, but Israel should, calm down. It should use, softer tactics. It should, help fund, fuel, feed its enemy. What? I mean, talking out of both sides of its mouth. So we need to speak against that. as harshly as we can. And then, frankly, just through Congress, everything we can do to defund any taxpayer dollars from going to any Palestinian entity. It isn't just Hamas, unfortunately, right? There are other terrorist groups. The Palestinian Authority, which governs Judea and Samaria, is also a huge problem. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is holding hostages. And then, of course, there's just other Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, et cetera, et cetera.
That we're running into as Americans. We lost 3 of our own soldiers that we know of that made the front page. But I want to get to the helping defund, is where we're pushing monies and then getting Israel monies. It looks like a bunch of chaos. And in fact, the media is making it sound like Republicans are up there just destroying everything that they say that they want. Is that what's really happening? Or is it that the Republicans are really trying to focus us on what really matters and make sure that we're only funding those things?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. They want to make sure that if we're not just doing something, right? You hear a lot of talk about you got to do something. Well, you got to do the right thing, right? And I think that's why a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives are opposed to that original border security, Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel supplemental appropriations bill that came out, because it actually in most cases weakened current law on the border security. In other words, we have current laws that the Biden Harris Mayorkas administration could be enforcing.
And Blinken, don't forget to add him, because
but he doesn't do border stuff. But,
we don't think he does border stuff, but all the terrorists that are now in the country because of border stuff that are out of that region, I'm not going to disconnect him. He could be doing
international diplomacy.
He's over there telling
right.
Israel, slow down, cease fire. We like you, but this is not going to work for American interests, as you pointed out, and it's certainly not helping our allies, Israel.
Yeah, and it's so inconsistent with how America has treated other nations who have had cross-border, incursions, wars, et cetera, and frankly, even just going back to, let's just say, the Holocaust. Would we have ever said, how are the German civilians doing? By the way, how many German kids have been killed during this war? How many Japanese kids did we kill in Okinawa? Would we have ever in a million years asked or cared? And we shouldn't have, because that's unfortunately what war is.
That is what war is, and it's interesting you even mentioned the Japanese, because my dad was in the Air Force at Vietnam, so we were stationed in Japan while he was in the Philippines getting the wounded out of. Interesting dynamic, his family, just to be closer. But during that time in Japan, people were still actually dying from the bomb we had dropped 25 years earlier.
Yeah, amazing.
And there wasn't that much attention on, do we have to now provide their health care? One of the things that Carolyn did talk about was, the Gazians, that they're forced to stay there. I was intrigued by that part of her presentation.
Right, yeah, the Egyptians not being helpful, right? Jordanians certainly not being helpful.
Made it sound like that there are places that want to help, but it's them that have decided not to go, to leave, because of that UN aid compact, if you will, that they're trapping them there to use them almost as political ploys to advance the interest of Hamas.
Right. There was even some footage they were showing of, some Palestinian civilians trying to leave Gaza, and Hamas kind of shooting at them, saying, "You're not leaving because we need you as human shields. We need you as pawns." It's just terrible.
I only have another minute with you, Paul. What should we do now? Why did you convene this group? A very, very important group. We couldn't go in. It's a very private situation when leaders here gather and try to get the intel so that they can now distribute to their places and spaces, as I'm doing with you. But what should we have? What would you have liked us to take away, each and every one of us, even though we have different groups similar to yours, but you gathered it here?
No, absolutely. Yeah, frankly, the impetus for us doing it, first of all, again, besides Carolyn being just fantastic, and I knew she was in town, it's because our media, even some of our greatest friends in the media, are not really covering the war on Israel anymore, right? I mean, or if they are, it's a talking head. It's somebody sitting in a studio all made up saying, here's what's going on. They're not really covering, right? When was the last time you saw new footage of, Hamas leaders being captured, killed, or something like that? You just don't see that
She's
anymore.
Going to send us a cure footage that she says that the people of Israel are very engaged to win this, that they're actually at their government saying, don't you dare cease fire, which was news to me.
Exactly.
So you're right. We're
just not hearing it. We're not getting, and she was telling us in this meeting some of the insider truth from Israel, because she lives there, obviously. And that's what was just so powerful. But also, the second reason is just that piece that she circulated, and hopefully you'll get to maybe put on your website or something, where she just goes through all the evidence of how the Biden administration is undermining Israel, not even just being neutral and certainly not being positive, active undermining, and it's just devastating and needs to get out there.
Well, we're going to more than put that column that you shared with us that she wrote on our website. We're going to put it on our blackcommunitynews.com, which reaches our 900 pastors who are also concerned, because that narrative that they're hearing out of Palestinians is the same narrative that we hear out of our poorer communities and from leaders of these poorer communities, that their problems are somebody else's fault, that they are being oppressed. And in fact, we're combating now a group that's well funded to say that there are 1,000 black pastors who are saying ceasefire, ceasefire. So that narrative is too similar, and the challenge with it is, if you buy the idea that you can't fix your own problems, then you can't. And it's not true. God distributed talents for everyone to self-govern. So that's where we are. Tell us your website for people that want to find out more about what you're doing. We sign off on a lot of amicus briefs for you guys. They're like totally in the courts, okay? I don't think there's a week there's not a week goes by that says, okay, Advancing American Freedom is now on this topic. In fact, you guys are doing stuff to push back the darkness of the trans world. I mean, that thing is where you're fighting for the parents that want to keep their children from being trans without their knowledge.
It's amazing we even have to do that, right? That it's an issue, but it's an issue, so we're doing it. But,
so where can
so advancingamericanfreedom.com, a little bit long, but advancingamericanfreedom.com, and you'll see folks can click around. There's a variety of just legal items, policy items, messaging, videos, you name it. And so we'd love to have your folks take a visit.
Well, they will. I'm sure that some of you that are saying, we need to know more. I want more. I want more. I want more. You can get the more. And then actually Paul spoke at our policy summit with our pastors just past October. Maybe he's going to be there again this coming October, because Israel will be on our agenda. Last one we had like 2 weeks after this horrible incident and call to war. I think people even get lost that no, they called them Israel to war. Israel didn't start this war. But Israel says they're going to finish this war. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You won't hear the last
honor.
of him. He'll be working with us a lot. And upcoming next, I'm going to talk to Richard Manning. You know Richard regularly on my panel, but because Richard was also here at this private meeting as Americans for Limited Government, I told him, okay, I know you went all the way over to the studio to be the panel. Come back over to Paul's place so that we can interview you here. So I'll be with Richard right after this. Well, I'm here with one of my most favorite panelists, Richard Manning, but we're not in studio at Cure America because Richard was also in this very private meeting that we had. And incredible, Richard, that you and I both heard the presentation from Carolyn Glick. I'm still nervous, and when as I told Paul Teller just a moment ago on the same show, when we were talking together, we were both fighting tears at the same time because this is some serious business. What was the takeaway? You were here as American for Limited Government.
Correct.
And as I've introduced to our audience, our regular audience, because you're regular with us, that this is an insider game in what we normally do here in Washington. So they're going into a different space. So talk from who you are as the president of that organization, why you were here, and then what did you take away?
Well, one of the questions I get more than any other is, why should we support Israel? Why should we support Ukraine? Those are kind of questions that a lot of people are asking. And I think you have to separate Israel from Ukraine. Number one, Israel has a historical tie with the United States that Ukraine does not, at least not as strong. Israel is the seat of Judeo-Christian ethos, and we know more about Israel as people who read the Bible than any other country in antiquity. So we have a connection, a connection through our shared. We're a branch of the tree. We are grafted on to the tree. So we have an understanding of that. But in modernity, one of the things that I think we know is that the United States has vowed to help protect Israel in a world where it is surrounded by enemies, surrounded by people who vow to drive the Jews into the sea and destroy it. And as a result of that, we have made a commitment to Israel. And unfortunately, our current government is really doing everything they can to back away from that commitment. And so what we learned today was a little bit about some of the history of why does Israel right now need America's help in terms of rearming itself.
That was very interesting intel. Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you. Yeah, because that was a major part of the last week on Cure America, which we rushed through the panel. That's why I thank you for being by yourself on this one to get deeper into it. You were telling us about even the impact on America going up through that water, that the Houthis have totally destroyed the ability for us to get product. What is driving such a hatred? And not just what's driving it, why is the UN seeming to be on the side of the Palestinians and all the Arab nations around Israel? As Carolyn pointed out, this has been going on 50-something years since they got there.
Yeah, Israel is about, I think it's over 75 now since
75 years since 48. But she said the last 50
we've had since
the Six-Day War. She said since the 60s they've been doing nothing but these scrimmages, and the reason that they're scrimmages is because the UN, the U.S. can't make up their mind whose side they're on.
Well, let's be clear.
Those are not her words. Those are not her words, but that's just what I got.
The United Nations has set up a system where one of their agencies is based in and solely revolved around the refugees who are the Palestinian refugees, supposed refugees. They don't allow them to leave. They don't allow them to thrive. They're kept in a perpetual state of turmoil, and the UN is perpetuating that.
Why?
Well, because there are those within the UN who don't believe that a Jewish state should exist, and who are anti-Semitic.
And these are European countries.
These are European, but also a lot of, remember, the UN is on the General Assembly side. You can count the democracies on two hands, but you can't have. But by and large, most of the countries in the UN are not democracies. They don't share Western values. They are countries that are essentially dictatorships and have far more in common with the leaders of the Palestinians than they do with the leaders of Israel. And so that's one of the challenges with this. I'll give you
But before you leave that, because it's just why we heard during the Trump administration that he started questioning the UN's role in the world, and had his ambassador, then Nikki Haley, trying to pull us out or be in a stronger voice. Is this the reason that I had no idea that
this is one of the reasons. We just, it's surprising to a lot of people, not surprising to me, but surprising to a lot of people, that the UN Human Rights Agency, which was set up specifically to govern Palestine and to make sure their human rights, they got food and water and that kind of stuff, that a number of the UN Human Rights Agency's actual staff participated both in the planning and on the October 7th attack on Israel. What we have is and it's not surprising when you go to a UNHRA, that's UN Human Rights Association, when you go to their a school being run on the West Bank, or as we would know, Judea, Samaria, part of Israel, it says stabbing a Jew. They've got a sign up. It says in a school, stabbing a Jew uplifts the Palestinian cause. Okay? What we have is a UN agency that is breeding hate. And
why are we now being exposed to it after such an atrocity? Why was Israel attempting to reveal that these things were happening and we just didn't hear them? Were they too subtle in telling us that this is being taught in their schools? And we kept hearing about little things. Then the pizza parlors were being bombed, and we know. And I quoted this week in my column about Golda Meir saying this won't even stop until they love their children more than they hate us.
Right.
What have we met? We know what Obama did to strengthen the hand of the Palestinian cause, if you will, or those that are haters of Israel. what did we miss in this relationship that now we're all involved in trying to help them exist, survive?
One of the things that's most common is we tend to want to have people believe that everybody sees the world through the same eyes we do. Okay? Not everybody is from a Judeo-Christian culture. Most people are not from a Judeo-Christian culture. It's very, the Bible says very clearly you can't hold somebody who's not a Christian to the standards that you hold a Christian to. Okay? So but we want everybody to think like us, because even though they are built, their whole way of thinking is different. We've known what's being taught in the Palestinian schools for a long time. I mean, that's been public record. But we've wanted to sort of just say, no, nobody could really believe that. And that's why October 7 was so shocking, because it kind of knocked down that kind of naivety. The fact is, on October 7, when they attacked the kibbutzes in the southern part of in the Negev, southern part of Israel, when they attacked a music festival, which was for peace, by the way, a peace music festival.
It was a peace holiday.
When they attacked,
holiday there,
and they brutalized people, it opened the eyes not just of people in the West, but people in Israel, that the idea that we're going to give work visas, for instance, to people in Gaza so they can come across and make a living, make money, and go back and have a better standard of living and try to integrate some of the economy and some of the benefits of the Western civilization in Israel, that in fact was used as a tool against them, as many of those people who had used the information they got from being in the kibbutzes to actually be able to tell the fighters exactly where to go and what to do.
It was pretty organized.
It was an intel operation rather than anything.
It's reminding me of one of the trips I made to Israel was with my Huckabee's annual pilgrimage there. And what was fascinating to me, of the 2 million, Arabs that do live in Israel, people forget about them. When a particular speaker came, it was, it was a day, well, it was a long week, but this one day of various speakers, how you have conference. This particular speaker came, and I can't remember exactly. All of a sudden, the chatter in the room in the Arab language, it was actually became so loud that they slowed the program. And I wondered at that point why they were even in the room, and I noticed that even here in America, to your point about how we're so innocent that we're stupid sometimes, that we really think people are innocent and are not using what they're hearing against us. And we'll be in rooms with private intel, but the wait service is in there, and then even though you want to kind of trust them, but it was a visible moment to know that these folks can't necessarily be trusted. I know in Black history, oftentimes people talk about, the slaves in the big house and how wonderful they had life, and try to, other than the field hand, and even though their lives were really brutal, they weren't that easy because they were so close to master that they were mistreated even more. But they were also our intel, that the first time you heard words like there's abolitionists, there's discussion in the North to end slavery. So there is a role of them. And what you're telling us is that they went back, it was a total intel breakdown. Real quick, only a minute, where do we go from here? I've been asking each of our guests, what is it that our audience needs to do next? We've been praying for the peace of Jerusalem since it's in our scripture, but this is war.
It is war. And what we need to do as Americans is demand that we get the Israeli funded. The Congress act on the Israeli funding, separate from Ukraine, separate from everything else, but get Israel funded. The reason is very simple. Under the Obama administration gave a bunch of money to Israel, but the condition was that they shut down a lot of their arms factories. And as a result, Israel is now dependent upon U.S. munitions to be able to defend itself. That has disastrous consequences. Israel's rebuilding the munitions industry right now as fast as possible, but we have a moral responsibility, since we killed their munitions industry, to replenish the American arms that they're currently dependent upon. Do that. That's the one thing. Demand Congress help Israel and pass the Israeli funding.
So without any other intel, this is what you'll need to do. Just trust us to say that's what you need to do. Call your congressman today.
That's exactly right. It's up and it's a live conversation right now, and it's something that's important, and this is probably the most timely one of these things we've done, because things are on the floor. Right now, when you see this, they're on the floor. So contact your congressman and say, support the Israel funding. America broke their munition system, made them dependent upon us, and now are withholding the capacity to actually defend themselves and defend their country. That's wrong, it's immoral, and we have to make certain that we break that pattern and allow them to defend themselves now and develop their own munitions industry so they can defend themselves in the future without us.
For their survival, as we heard from Carolyn Glick. Thanks, Richard.
You're
we'll
welcome.
be back next week with Richard on the panel, and we'll be back with you next week here on Cure America as we sort through the noise of the news to find some truth. Found some truth today about things happening in Israel. Might not sound that pretty, but we know that ultimately the Lord's hand is in control of all. He turns the heart of man the way that he wants to, according to Scripture. And then in Ecclesiastic, King Solomon said, here's the end of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. That's all man can really do. Individual self-government allows for freedom around the world. God bless you. I'll see you again next week.